Hi everyone, welcome to the latest and greatest episode. Today I'm sitting down with John Gillen, the co-founder of True Capital and the host of Milk Road Macro. In this episode, we talk about the process of accepting and feeling grief, as well as what it's like to experience heartbreak in a relationship, how to get yourself out of it, as well as getting through any rough times using different practices that he's learned along his journey. I hope you enjoy and learn as much from this episode as I have. So we were in a very interesting conversation about the idea of being with someone for love versus being with someone for other characteristics. So I think we can think about it in both ways. In the male's perspective, a lot of men go after young women for their looks because they're attractive, they're youthful, childbearing age, let me tell you. And then on the other side, women go for men who have status. Why are you laughing?
The childbearing, like all men are prospectors looking for a wide-hip woman. Like, okay,
no, wow, that's obviously a joke. But then on the other side, you have women who are looking for men who are successful. I was just talking to a friend who said, Claire, trust me, you don't want to go after a guy who has nothing to his name. You're going to regret it. And I've also been with friends who say you want to build with someone. So it's very conflicting information. And I think I've been personally in situations with men who either have a ton of success and I've still been unhappy, and also guys who have no success and I've still been unhappy. So I guess I wanted your perspective on what you think of that.
I think a lot of that depends on, first of all, hello, nice to see you again. I think a lot of that depends on the two individuals. Why was it kind of a diss? What was it? We just started very unceremoniously here. I like to be, hello is usually customary. I think a lot of these things depend on the circumstances of the two individuals in the relationship and what they're looking for or willing to tolerate at that time and under those circumstances. So, I think there's not like a clearly defined version of this, but it's like, what phase of life you're in, what are you looking for in a partner? I think in general, though, having some sort of economic viability is a baseline level of expectation that most people have of male partners. And I think that a lot of men are looking for, traits and qualities that make a woman a good partner for life, or a attractive sexual partner, or a mother. There's different reasons for both of these things, and like you're going to get different responses and different results from different people at different parts of their lives. Some of it's got to do with age, some of it's got to do with other things. But I think the other thing I would say is that a lot of these things are necessary but not sufficient, right? So I think I mentioned this in a prior episode where like it's necessary to find somebody physically attractive if you want to have them as a sexual partner, but that's not sufficient for a long-term healthy relationship with them. So there's a lot of little pieces of that, I think.
Yes. So the last guy I was seeing seriously, he was very financially successful, and when I said I no longer wanted to do this anymore because we were very heavily misaligned on the type of relationship that we wanted, he wanted to continue seeing other women. And I said, that is not how I operate, sir. And I feel like he was basically negotiating with me. It's like, Claire, you are getting the lifestyle, whatever you want. You will never have to worry financially about anything ever again. Why is that not enough? Women would kill to be in your position. And to that I said, because I'll be suffering permanently. And for whatever I'm not paying for, I will probably have to pay for in some other way. And he's not a bad person or anything. It was just, I think, misunderstanding and misalignment of what we wanted. But it's kind of like the internal battle I have a lot with myself, because I am super ambitious myself, and I do have big goals I want to accomplish myself. So of course I want to be with a guy who also wants to accomplish those same things and also wants to be ambitious. But I feel like as a woman, because your time, like you do have a ticking time bomb, right? You are betting on a horse. And the idea that you need to bet on the right horse, you need to bet on someone who is smart, who you think will be successful, who you think has good values and all that stuff. And there's some things you just can't tell until time passes,
So there's a lot of pieces of this. I think I'll start with the thing you ended on there. Loving someone or dating someone for their potential is a dangerous thing, because you do in some sense have to do that when you're entering into a relationship. You are investing in another person, but you're also investing in a third thing that you're creating together, which is your relationship with one another. And there has to be long-term and deep value-based alignment on that for both people. And then you have to be very clear with that person. Are you investing in their potential that you're actually working towards together and growing in the same direction together? Or are you investing in their potential because you're trying to change them in some fundamental way that they're not actually committed to or aligned with, and that's not ultimately healthy? So you have to kind of be honest with yourself, and they have to be honest with you about that, and making sure you're clear on the difference, because dating for potential and investing in a relationship because of the potential that it holds is what everybody does, but it's important to understand like the specifics of that and make sure you're doing that in a healthy way. The other thing is all right, let's take this one thing at a time. Go ahead.
My question was, how do you know the fine line between dating for potential realistically versus dating for potential delusionally? Because you, at the end of the day, you have to give that person a chance. Everyone is based on potential because you don't know what that person's going to be like 5 years, 10 years down the line. I did hear from one of my previous guests that the relationship is kind of like you are just hoping that your core values stay the same. And if your core values stay the same as each other, then the person could morph into an entire different person, but their core values will be the same. So that's enough. What do you think about that?
I think that there's some truth to that. I think that oftentimes we paint red flags green and we go into relationships with rose-colored glasses. We don't see the red flags, and to some extent, like that's a natural part of like the honeymoon phase of starting any relationship. I think that in time these things come out, and you are really, what I would say is to look at what the person's behavior and actions indicate about them as opposed to what they say, because a person can feel one way and say certain things and write checks that they can't actually cash, that they maybe want to be true or aspirationally true, but if their behavior is not aligned with that, I think that's the most important thing. And so I think that love is a choice, and it is based on actions and behaviors, and it's not an emotion, it's not butterflies, it's not infatuation or limerence or any of the other unhealthy things. So I think that that's an important thing to do. One way of doing this is to try to get perspective from other trusted people. So if you have healthy, reciprocal, trusting relationships with other individuals, this could be parents, this could be friends, this could be a therapist, just a person who knows you well and it has seen you with this person and seen them with you and like kind of knows a little bit about the situation, to ask them for a temperature check and the sanity check and be like, what's your perspective? Am I missing anything? Is there something you're seeing that I am seeing it differently? And then to not be too quick to dismiss that, because I think sometimes when we're in relationships, we experience things and see them differently. And this is something I'm dealing with now, is like, after you get out of a relationship, your perspective on things can shift a lot, and then there become layers of truth of like, this is how I experienced it at the time, but then now that I see things differently and understand it differently, I have a different perspective. So those are some of the ways to deal with that, but to some extent, this is what the dating process is for. And the courting process really should be courtship, not dating, if you're looking for a life partner and a spouse. But another thing, we didn't kind of go back to close the loop on this. A thing that not everybody, but a lot of people do in modern society is they try to treat their relationship partner, their marriage partner, their spouse as a co-parent, a therapist, a adventure buddy, an emotional partner, a romantic partner, a sexual partner, somebody who they want to have like a very stable, long-term, financial, emotional, familial relationship with, but also a kinky sex partner and all these other things. Putting all that into one relationship is beautiful and wonderful if you can achieve that alignment on so many different aspects of life with one person. It also puts an enormous amount of burden and pressure on that, and that wasn't always the case customarily. Like a marriage initially was an economic institution. It was created to build families, build wealth, and organize societies around an economic unit. In France in the 1600s, it was very common for people to have marriage partners that were based on economic or social, political, advantageous situations and things that they were getting from that were socially important. But then romantically, they would have affairs very commonly, and it was sort of like understood. So in your example, he's making a proposal to you that maybe is very much out of alignment with what you're looking for. And if that's not in integrity with what you're seeking or what you're comfortable with, you're right to decline that. However, it's possible he'll find some other partner who is very comfortable with having an open relationship and sourcing, economic stability and security from him, but looking for emotional intimacy, vulnerability, or sexual partners outside of that in other ways. These things are very complicated. The other thing I'll say kind of conclude this is that nothing in relationships are static, not the people, not the dynamics, and not what people are comfortable with in them. And so as they evolve, it's important to continue to check in about that. But yeah, just some general thoughts about that, because there's a lot of different ways to construct a relationship, and some things work for some people and some don't, and you just have to be honest with yourself and others about that.
Yeah, I think also something else I want to talk about is how do you sort through all of the relationship information that there is? I feel like personally, because I have never been in a super long-term, happy, healthy, loving relationship. I would say my last relationship was the closest thing I got to being pretty healthy. But there is so much information. It's about, you need to do this, you need to do that. Oh, man should pay for everything. No, he actually shouldn't pay for everything. This is against feminists. This is not feminist. Oh, man, you should be providing. No, you shouldn't be providing. No, you should actually be the princess. And then it's just, there's so much information. I feel overwhelmed. I guess.
I think if somebody offers you a chance to be the princess, you should always take it. But no, continue. That was a joke, by the way. That was a joke. That was totally a joke. Yeah, oh, man, I just stepped in it.
Let's talk more about that for a second. There is a running joke that men want to be princesses. There are videos of, no, I want to know your perspective. There are videos of men at the clubs dancing on elevated surfaces where women used to dance back in the day.
These are heterosexual men?
These are heterosexual men, that's correct. They like being the center of attention. What are your thoughts on that?
I have no thoughts on that. I don't go clubbing. I don't know the men who do this, and I don't really have a view on that. But I do have a view on the previous thing you raised, which is how do you go through digesting all the different relationship and life advice that's out there. I think that there is, number one, a great advantage that comes from the ability to create and share content, ideas, and information around these things, because a lot of people are going through life without access to this information or had been. And you're right, many people don't have, either from parents or from other relationship partners, a model or an experience of what a healthy relationship, a securely attached relationship dynamic looks like. And so it's very difficult to just by chance, right, create that with a partner without having some idea of what healthy looks like. I would just say that it's important to not let anxiety or pressure drive you on these things. In other words, you don't have to frantically go looking for the right answer everywhere and take all this stuff in. But I think that you should trust yourself to take in new ideas, take in information, learn that, integrate it, digest it. And I think there's a multitude of counselors brings wisdom. So it's, I think, generally good advice to not get overly committed or hung up on one specific theory or point of view, but to take in a lot of them. And in the multitude of experiences and theories and frameworks, you begin to get a more circumspect, more complete appraisal of what healthy and unhealthy relationship dynamics look like, where you maybe need to do some work, where certain kinds of behaviors that you don't want to tolerate, or unhealthy behaviors that you maybe didn't understand before, but now you do, and you know to watch out for those and not accept them. So it's just a continual process, and we all learn by experience, right? It's impossible to learn to plow by reading books. Is a book on filmmaking by Richard Linklater. In order to learn how to make a film, you have to make a film. In order to learn how to have a healthy relationship with someone, you have to have a relationship partner, and then have grace with each other while we try to learn and get better and work on our wounds and have grace for other people while they're doing the same. But it's a lifelong process that doesn't end, and there's not like any sort of like, read this one book and you'll be fixed type of thing. It evolves as we evolve, and it's a lifelong process of education and practice.
Yeah, because I think if anything I've learned is that the real work on being in a healthy relationship or situationship, whatever situation you're in.
I don't think any situationship is healthy. I think it's definitionally an unhealthy relationship dynamic to be in a situationship.
Well, sometimes it can be a situationship up to the process of becoming a relationship. When you're getting to know that person, it can be a situationship.
I would call that courtship, but
courtship.
Or
I
dating.
It's very formal. I love
it depends
being
on
courted.
your goals. Dating is different than courtship. These are non-trivial distinctions, and I think a situationship is just an emotionally messy situation without clear communication or boundaries or definitions. It's dangerous, I think, and it's not healthy.
That's a totally valid thing for you to say.
Thank you. I appreciate you validating that.
I forgot what I was saying.
Lovely.
But I think I was saying,
we're in a lot of trouble now.
I think what I've learned about being in healthy relationships or learning about myself while I'm in a relationship, it really can only happen when you are in a relationship with someone or in a romantic connection with someone, because you think when you're single, you're like, oh, I'm healed. I'm doing all of the work. Look at me, being tolerant, being patient, being wise, blah, 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 all this stuff. But as soon as you get into a relationship where you start liking someone again, everything just completely resurfaces and you're like, oh, wait a second. This is actually, I'm not at the place where I thought I was emotionally. And so I think for a lot of people, and I have a lot of friends who deal with this, and I've dealt with this myself, is that people will preemptively end a situation in order to avoid getting hurt. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm going to end things with you before you could possibly hurt me. And I had the habit of doing that myself. So I feel like there's no question here, but I think it's important to try things and not be afraid of putting yourself out there romantically.
I think that there's some wisdom in that. I think it depends on why you're ending the relationship. So I have found myself much more, I've been single for a long time. I am single. I'm likely going to remain single.
Doing a lot of work. Okay?
I am actually. But it's not because I'm afraid of intimacy. It's because I have now learned to identify different things about a partner that I do and don't want. And I have some clarity around that. And I have much more confidence and comfortability, without animosity or resentment or any kind of like difficulty or conflict, saying like, hey, I think you're a wonderful person, but I don't think we'd be aligned as partners, and, best wishes. That's not because I'm afraid of intimacy. It's because I've recognized that there are certain people that I could get into a relationship with because there's chemistry, butterflies, or attractiveness in one direction or another, or both. But that doesn't necessarily mean it'd be a healthy relationship. And I think that the end result of that would just be more pain, more confusion, more harm. And I have an aversion to participating in relationships where I feel like there's almost like a guaranteed outcome of harm to another person or to myself. But I think it's different from saying like, hey, this person seems great. They really like me. I really like them. We're aligned. But that intimacy and vulnerability scares me. So I'm going to like end the relationship for that reason. Those are different things, I think. And it can look ontologically similar, but the underlying motivations of the behavior is different. And this is ultimately what psychology is about, right? There's a lot of toxic relationships and ways of describing them that ontologically are very similar, but a lot of the underlying motivations can come from different places. And to your point about all this different relationship context or content and information, one of the things I've learned about is that there are so many different frameworks and ways of thinking about unhealthy or dysfunctional relationship dynamics that they might have differences and distinctions between them as a model or as a theory, but they all in some way describe similar sorts of dysfunction. So like a trauma bond, a twin flame relationship, a narcissist empath relationship, anxious and avoidant attachments, I can go on and on. There are a lot of different descriptions of these, and there are different versions of that, obviously. Like toxic relationships can come in all kinds of different flavors, but there's a lot of similarities to what's being described in Jungian psychology and Freudian psychology, and so you have to know the difference between this is an allopathic defense mechanism of discarding a relationship because of a fear of intimacy versus I don't want to get attached to this person because I don't think we'd be good partners, and so allowing attachment to grow would ultimately be harmful to both of us. So it's being honest with yourself about why you're making that decision to either participate or not participate in a given relationship.
And what are things that you've learned in your past relationship that you've reflected on that you're now going to carry on into the future relationship that you're in?
There are a lot of them. So I've gone on several dates with many people since that very unhealthy longer term relationship, which I still haven't told you a whole lot about off camera. So like at some point I should do that. But I learned a lot of lessons from that. I think, you learn that, it takes two to tango. There's always something on your side of the fence to clean up when a relationship's not working. And I think that's what I've been trying to be honest with myself about and take accountability and ownership of. And, not be too quick to justify, being clear about what my boundaries are. And if they're not being respected, not to compromise them or move them, but to just respectfully say hey, we should part ways. So there's a lot of things I learned about unhealthy dynamics that I was unconsciously giving permission to continue and encouraging that I don't do anymore. So yeah, I think that there's been a lot of things that came from that. But the biggest one for me is you have to be comfortable accepting that most people are not going to be ideally suited for you as a life partner. And that's not a sad thing. It's a beautiful and liberating and powerful thing, because it means that you have deeply held values and beliefs about things and goals in life that are unique and precious to you. And not everybody on the planet is going to be an ideal partner for somebody with those specific and deeply held values and beliefs. And so finding the few people that would be and will be is a special process that takes time and can be frustrating, but it's very, very much worth doing. And this is, I think, the biggest lesson that I took was that when I was single as a young man, I thought the worst thing that could happen to a man was to be alone. And I think a lot of men feel that way, especially today. 30%, or I think it's 50% of men under the age of 30 haven't been on a date with a woman in the last year. So a lot of men are feeling like they don't have opportunities to source romantic partners or attention from women. And so I thought being alone was the worst thing that could happen. What I learned was that being in a bad relationship is much worse than being alone. So a good relationship is the ultimate goal, and that's what I want. But I can't get there if I'm in a bad relationship, and it's much better for me to be single and conducting myself with integrity and self-respect, waiting for and looking for a healthy relationship with a life partner that meets my needs and I can meet hers, and we have a healthy, reciprocal, securely attached relationship dynamic. That's worth waiting for. And being single and alone is not any great loss while that is my goal, and that's what I'm investing in, holding space for, and working to prepare myself to be able to participate in. So that was, I think, the biggest takeaway from the unhealthy relationship that I had, is that being single is not as bad as being in a bad relationship, and a good relationship is worth waiting for and creating the circumstances now to set yourself up for success when that opportunity and that partner comes.
Do you agree with the statement that if you are looking too hard, it'll never find you? Do you know, it's like everyone talks about the minute they get in a relationship is when they stopped looking for it. Do you agree with that statement or disagree with that statement?
I think that there's some truth in it, but not because it's not like a washed pot or washed kettle never boils type of thing. It's more of when you are purpose-driven, especially as a man, right? If you are confident, competent, successful, purpose-driven, in flow, and conducting yourself with respect, integrity, competence, and demonstrating competence, that's inherently attractive, especially to women. Those are all qualities that women like about men. You see, you're like nodding and smiling, right? That's a kind of a man that people like, right? Mm-hmm. So if you are, I've told my brothers this, I've told other men this, if you are desperately searching for just any woman to give you validation, or putting all your time, thought, and attention and energy into that distracts you from living a purpose-driven life, and it costs you something of competence and a chance to grow yourself into a much more attractive man, because women are hypergamous by nature. They look for men with high social status, and so men will try to get shortcuts there of gambling for money or some other way, or going to the gym to just a six-pack abs isn't necessarily the most attractive thing in the world to women if there's not a personality and a whole man around that. So I think that's where some of that wisdom of that phrase comes from. If you're spending all of your time and interest and energy desperately looking for validation from a member of the opposite sex or from a partner or a relationship, you are kind of costing yourself your own mission and the self-development that makes you a really attractive person. And I think that's true of both genders, but I think about it from a man's perspective because I am a man. So yeah.
And speaking on more of the self-sufficiency and relying on yourself, you were in a very dark place after your breakup. And I feel like in reflecting on breakups, because mine was also very earth-shattering, it really takes you, it's a visceral feeling. You feel it in your body, you feel it in your soul, you feel like I don't think I'd felt that much pain in my chest in a very, very long time. I think I've only felt that twice in my life, and the second time was that breakup. And I don't want to speak for you, but I imagine it was very also physically painful. What are things that you have done that have brought you joy today? How did you get yourself out of that dark place?
So first, I want to say I'm very sorry you had that experience. That's terrible for anybody who lives through that, and I'm sorry you had to survive that kind of an experience.
I'm grateful.
Okay, well, it's still pain is not something I think anybody should celebrate, but suffering is part of life, so it is what it is. But I just wanted to express some compassion around that. I think that what you're describing is your nervous system saying that you're dying. And that is very painful. And the pain that you feel in your stomach and your chest is your vagal nerve, your vagus nerve. There's polyvagal theory about this, but it's your sympathetic nervous system screaming that you're dying. And it literally feels that way because you're not getting oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. Yeah, that's.
I could cry. That's so sad. It was like I literally. Ugh.
Yeah.
I'm not tearing up because I want to get back together with this person. This person's not a bad person, but it's more so reflecting on how much pain I was in, how excruciating it was. Like, I literally lost 8 pounds in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I've seen some of my other friends go through breakups, guys and girls. It is a visceral.
Yeah. You're dying.
Such a painful thing.
Your body believes that you're dying because you're not sourcing this. So look, we're human beings are by nature designed to live in community. Anything that severs intimate attachment relationships, we experience as a kind of death because that meant you were going to die. If you were expelled from the tribe, right? If those family relationships are broken, if somebody gets to a level of, when you have an intimate attachment partner, that is a familial level bond in your nervous system. So it's a life or death situation in your nervous system. So your body is telling you that you're dying. And so what it's trying to do by, like, I lost 15 pounds in I think 3 or 4 days and slept like I think a couple of hours accidentally, right? I've had very bad times with certain breakups, but that is because your nervous system is telling you you're dying. It's trying to drive you to go back and reconnect with that person, right? And so that's why it's getting into this level. It kicks you that hard because it says, hey, if you don't go like source this person, see them, talk to them, hear their voice, look at their face, touch them, you're gonna die. And so that's what it's doing. It's a survival mechanism, but it is also really painful to have to live through. How I got through that, I educated myself a lot about breakup protocols, resources, about my nervous system, about just a lot of different things about this, and then put a lot of things into practice because I think that your nervous system can be engaged with, and there are a lot of different therapeutic modalities to help people, not just like with directed thought patterns or meditation, but also somatic therapies like breath work, yoga, working out, going to the gym for men especially is very, very healthy. It helps rewire neural pathways, it promotes neuroplasticity, it helps you rewire your central nervous system away from dependence on the pathways that you've built around this person and divest into other areas that help you adapt and grow and survive. But you have to take that very seriously, and you have to treat it like a serious wound because it is a very serious wound to your nervous system. It's not something where, if you go through a severe breakup like that, you shouldn't be like changing jobs, trying to start a business. Like, you have to take a lot of mental, emotional, physical energy and direct it towards self-love, self-care, self-protection, empathy, be gentle with yourself, be compassionate with yourself, check in with yourself, take care of yourself. You have to treat your needs very seriously and not like, I think there's a lot of people who will tell you like, you get 24 hours and that's it, man. You got to get right back in that saddle and just get back out there, or like just go like, sleep with someone else to get out of your system, all these different unhealthy coping mechanisms. The biggest thing I would tell people is don't let the anxiety and panic of the need to quell that pain force you to reach for something to just like anesthetize yourself or numb yourself, like drugs, like gambling, like, let's say illicit sex, right? Like, you don't want to fall into something that's destructive just to stop a temporary pain, because that can have longer and even more damaging impacts than just feeling it. So let go of the anxiety, turn your love, attention, and energy to yourself, treat yourself as someone who has been wounded and needs compassion and care, and then take good care of yourself while you're healing.
Yeah, I think my biggest thing that helps me get through it was just even in the thick of it. I'm telling you, even when I wasn't eating, I was sleeping at one point. I never slept that much in my life. I normally sleep around 6 hours a day, 5 to 6 hours a day. My body just doesn't sleep more than that. I slept for 2 weeks straight for 14 hours out of the day because I would wake up and my heart was in so much pain. I would literally rather be asleep than be awake. And it was so sad. It was such a sad time. Yeah. And I've made it out the other side, but I think the biggest thing that helped me get through it was just like the certainty that I would be okay. Everything is temporary. I am going to be okay. I'm not eating today. I'm not eating tomorrow. I've lost so much weight, but I'm going to be okay. There will be a point where I'm going to be okay. So I didn't smile for a month. I think I barely smiled for a month. I don't think I've ever cried that much in my life. And then slowly after a month, it became like, oh, I'd call my mom. I'd say, hey, we're going to talk about the same thing over and over again. But then I'm going to say, hey, I smiled for the first time today. I laughed today. And I think it's interesting because heartbreak is such, for the most part, a very universal experience. Yeah. And I have this memory. This is such a core memory, and it's so random. I was taking an Uber to go downtown, and there was an apartment building near the water on the east side. And I was driving back, and all the lights were on. It was like a very lit up apartment. It was 9 p.m. Apartment complex. And I just remember looking and saying, you know what's crazy is that probably over half of those people have gone through heartbreak before. It's such a universal experience, and it's something that we know we can get through because we've seen so many people do it and fall in love again. People get divorced, people get married again. It's a part of life. But it's so crazy because when you're going through it, like even talking about it, remembering how I felt at the time, it's insane.
Yeah, it is. And again, I'm very sorry you had to survive that. Like you said, it's a pretty common experience, but it is always a tragedy. And it's not something that is something to be treated with flippancy. It's not trivial. One thing that helped me was I pray a lot. I'm a person of faith. I write prayers for myself. And the moment it happened, I laid down on the floor, and I knew that I was about to have one of the worst 6 months to 2 years of my life. And I wrote down, I will love again and I will live again. And whenever I would feel the overflow of pain coming, I would say that over and over to myself because it was small and simple enough for me to remember it, and it wasn't taxing on my memory, and I could say it over and over again. I will love again. I will live again. I will love again. I will live again. And that helped calm me down and center myself. Another thing I will say about this is that there is a lot of research around this that people can avail themselves to help and find heartbreak protocols that work for them. And I would say, again, there are a lot of modalities and therapeutic practices you can do. You have to find what's comfortable for you, what works for you, what's effective for you. One thing I will say is that there's a difference between your cerebral cortex and your limbic system. Without going into what that means, your limbic system is where these attachments live, and you have to rewire those attachments. When those neural pathways fire again and you feel that attachment and that love, and once the relationship is severed, it's no longer love, in my opinion. It is an attachment. It's like an addiction. You have to cure that out of your body. There's certain protocols you can follow to rewire those pathways. And there's one researcher, I can't remember his name right now. I think it was Arthur Ashton or something to that effect. But he did research on attachment. And he came up with a list of 36 questions that in 1 hour, two people could go through together and then maintain eye contact for 6 minutes. And I think it was something like 60 or 70% of the people, totally strangers, reported feelings of love for the other person. And so he did research in the opposite direction of okay, if you're going through a heartbreak and you need to, ask questions to dewire this connection and deprogram these neural pathways in your mind, I think it was a set of 6 questions that he wrote out. And so whenever I would feel that, those pathways firing and the heartbreak coming back, I would go over those 6 questions, and it helps rewire your limbic system, rewrite the story that you have saved about this person, and help you release the attachment that you have. All that said, this is a long, lengthy process, and it's not something that you can just snap your fingers and no longer be attached to a person. There's a beautiful letter that I love and I've read many, many times. It's helped me when I've been going through this recent heartbreak over the last 2 years. Richard Feynman was a famous physicist, and he married a woman who had a chronic illness, and I think they were only able to be physically intimate one time in their marriage, but he loved her very much and she loved him. And after she died, he wrote a letter to her 16 months after she died, and it remained sealed. He didn't share it with anyone until after his death, and then the letter was published. But the line from it is, "My wife is dead, I love my wife." No, it's "I love my wife is dead." One of the two. I think it's "I love my wife is dead." That helped me a lot too. Just like "I will love again, I will live again" helped me. I love my wife is dead. I love the person that I was attached to, the time that I had with them, the connection that I felt. That love is still within me. I can still create that again in a new, healthy relationship where I'm not being, abused, neglected, and manipulated. But my wife is dead, that person is dead, that attachment is gone, that doesn't exist anymore, that fantasy has been destroyed. because it wasn't a healthy relationship. It was a fantasy that I was in love with, not a real person. Anyway, I'm rambling a bit, but I think that you have to have patience. Find the protocols that work for you. You're not alone in this. You're not the only person who's ever done this. Don't try to do this alone. Don't just white knuckle it. Avail yourself of resources. Make sure you're well equipped, and try to find what works for you while you're going through the process.
Yeah, I would say the last thing I think that made a huge difference for me was my friends. Like my friends, my family. Oh my Lord. If I could tell you. One of my best friends, Aisha, she literally slept on the phone with me because she didn't want me to be by myself because I was just crying all the time.
That's cute.
It was so cute. And I mean, my mom, I don't think my mom ever was like, okay, I'm flying to New York to make sure she's okay. But she was, she would call me for at least like an hour a day for I think the first 30 days. And then slowly, you just get yourself out of it. But I want to pivot more towards the happy thing. I think it's, breakups are always very interesting to talk about because it's, again, what we talked about, what feels like a universal experience. Everyone deals with it differently. And despite it hurting so bad, we still actively seek the idea that that could potentially happen again. But I think that's the part of what makes love is so beautiful. And that to me going through heartbreak and being viscerally cut in half in every way possible and still wanting to be in a relationship, wanting to get married, wanting to have kids at some point proves how powerful love is. And I think something else about love that I absolutely adore is that love comes in all shapes, sizes, and forms. I think we talked a little bit about this last time, but there is love in life in general. When you're walking and then the fall air is crispy and you see a leaf fall down and you're listening to some Hans Zimmer, like to me, that's a highlight. Or when you're eating really good food at a restaurant, or when you see one of your friends laughing, when you see one of your friends accomplishing something, when I see you smiling, sitting across from me, like those are the things that exist that are love that I don't think you necessarily need a romantic partner for. Give me some of the things that you love that are in a non-romantic way.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think that there are many forms of love. They don't all involve romantic or sexual partners. And I think that's a beautiful thing to celebrate. I love so many things. I love New York City. I love New York City pizza, New York City bagels. I love Martin Scorsese. I love Humphrey Bogart and John Wayne. I love old movies. I love Warner Brothers. I love Johnny Cash. I love writing songs. I love poetry. I love William Shakespeare. I'm a very like art-driven person, as you can tell. But yeah, I love being able to feel a distinct emotional experience of love and then create a version of that preserves and conveys that emotion, that idea, that experience, and sharing that with other people. And I love going out into the world and finding some other piece of art, literature, maybe something from thousands of years ago, like the Book of Job, which we've talked about, where there's like this like deeply human and like personally resonant thing, this experience, this idea, that's feeling that someone else has had, that they've expressed in a way that you wish you could have conveyed it. And it's like this hand, this is a line from a movie, The History Boys. It's like a hand has reached out across time and place and taken yours and said, you are not alone. You are important. You are precious. You are loved. You're good, and you deserve to be here. And it's good that you're here. That to me is one of the most beautiful things in human experience, is feeling these things, experiencing them, having them being extremely distinct and unique to us. Like nobody's ever had the exact kind of heartbreak that I've had or that you have had, but then taking that, finding what's true and human and universal in it, and then sharing that so that can bless, encourage, support other people. That is how we all learn, share, grow, and get through life together and get better together and become wiser and stronger and learn to love ourselves and each other better. And that's a beautiful process to get the privilege to be part of. And I just think it's wonderful. But for me, that involves a lot of literature, music, and film, and creating those things and getting to do that with my life is a beautiful experience that doesn't require a romantic partner or a sexual partner. But it does require an audience. It requires collaborators. It requires language that we've all shared and like agreed upon, and mediums of expression that we've all collaborated on. So I think that there's a lot of beautiful things in life, and it could be a meal. It could be anything. It could be dance. It could be anything. But there's a lot of beautiful things in the world that don't involve a romantic partner. And leaning into those when you lose a romantic partner, it's a good way to remind yourself of how much there is to live for outside of the relationship that you've lost.
Yes, and I think that brings me to the next topic of like practicing gratitude and being appreciative for what you have. I think when going through heartbreak or any tough times, it is easy to start just putting yourself in the glass half empty perspective. I've been guilty of that so much, is that when it feels like it rains, it pours, you know? And I guess from your perspective, what are things that you have done that help you stay grounded and have you practice gratitude?
I literally do a gratitude practice. I do meditations in the morning and evening.
Can you jump into details on what a gratitude practice is? Because I don't know what that is.
So I think that everybody has to come up with their own way of engaging with this, right? It could be, look, Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. On Thanksgiving, I text people. They must think I'm crazy, but I don't care. I text people that I haven't seen in years or talked to in a long time, and I tell them how much that, like, I think of you and I remember this and how kind you were, and I'm so grateful that we got to know each other. I'm so glad you were my friend. And I spend like half the day on Thanksgiving. I don't ever get to enough people because like there's so many people I love and who I'm grateful for that I don't have enough time. But I will spend literally several hours on Thanksgiving just texting people and just telling them I'm grateful for them and sending thank yous. So that's one kind of gratitude practice. Meditation is something I do every morning and evening, even if it's just for a few minutes. But as part of that, I try to do a different kind of guided meditation. So I cycle through different ones. Some of them are gratitude. Some of them are loving kindness. But in any event, I try to direct every day some of my time and mental energy towards love, gratitude, gratefulness, taking stock of the blessings that I've had, being grateful for the opportunities that I've had, and for tomorrow and yesterday and all the things that come with that. So you kind of have to find what is comfortable for you and for your life and what feels natural and fine for you. But yeah, I do that. And then I also, I pray and I give thanks a lot. And Jesus in the Lord's Prayer models how we should pray. And like a big part of it is like, you know, being thankful for the gifts of today, our daily bread, and forgiveness and all these things. So like, I think Jesus's prayer of the Lord's Prayer is a great model for things you should do every day. And like, yeah, so I think that there's a lot of different things I do that like center gratitude, but it's always a little bit different.
Okay. I am someone with the attention span of a goldfish, okay? And I've tried meditation, I've tried yoga. I get really frustrated in yoga because I feel as if they're moving too slow and it forces me to stop and think. And I don't want to do that. So what are ways that someone who has no idea how to meditate could start meditating? And I told someone who's a meditation teacher during yoga, I said, ma'am, my thoughts are not calm. I'm unwell. And she goes, that's kind of the point, is that you have to let all of your thoughts run through you. What is your take? Because
I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Okay, let's lock in.
So first of all, I think I'll start with this. There's nothing wrong with you. Okay. I think you're fine. It's a completely normal experience that you're having of like being bored with yoga, being bored. Like, this is a lot of people have the same feedback. So that's completely normal. And I just want to validate that. Yeah.
Sorry. Can I just tell you what happens when I start to meditate and I do yoga? So it's as if I feel like I get restless leg syndrome. All of a sudden my brain's gets frustrated because I'm thinking, okay, I need to clear my mind. And once I try to clear my mind, I get frustrated because I'm like, your mind isn't clear. Why aren't we clearing the mind? And then physically I start moving around and I realize all of these maybe muscle knots that I have in my back or my legs. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just a horrible experience. And then I just end up, by the end of the class, I feel so infuriated that this is what I'm feeling that I walk out of there. I don't feel rested and refreshed. I feel quite the opposite. I feel very agitated.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, I'm going to need a little bit to kind of like organize some thoughts on this. So, first of all, I'll start with the first thing that's on my mind. There are a lot of different kinds of yoga. There are a lot of different practices of yoga. So yin yoga is very slow and contemplative. They hold the poses for a long time. So if you're doing that practice and you want it to be more upbeat, faster moving, you're practicing the wrong kind of yoga for that experience. If you'd like, I mean, I would actually like this to see what your experience would be, but like I go to Equinox, they offer different kinds of yoga classes there. So the heated power yoga class that I take with the lead instructor for all of the Equinoxes on the Lower East Side at Bond Street is it's a 75-minute class. It's one of the most challenging physical experiences I've ever had. It is not too slow. I'm always sweating and exhausted by the end of it. That I've never been bored in. I'm always struggling to keep up. So that's a much different kind of yogic practice, right? So it's like you have to find what version of it is. The other thing I'll say is that what you're describing of not being able to sit still, feeling frustrated, that in Buddhist traditions, they refer to as the monkey mind, of this like always looking for the next thought, always looking for some other thing to distract yourself or entertain yourself. And the point of meditation, they say, is to try to like calm that and get yourself to sit and watch your thoughts pass as though an observer watches a passing river.
Equanimity.
The disconnect here is that there are multiple parts of our nervous system, and different ones behave in different ways. So what you're describing is very like left-brained, executive function, high energy, let's go. That kind of, when you're in that kind of mindset, state of mind and body, it's going to be very frustrating and uncomfortable for you to practice meditation. However, if you downregulate from your sympathetic nervous system to your parasympathetic nervous system, calm yourself, then you will find meditation a little bit more accessible. I would this would be my surmising, right? Because this is my experience too. When I'm in like a let's go type of mindset and I try to meditate, it's very frustrating. It's like getting a kid out of recess and then trying to like, put them in a straitjacket. They're going to not like that experience. But if you do some breathing practices, that's, I think, the easiest way, because your breathing directly influences your nervous system. If you do some calming breathing meditation or breathing practices like a box breath, which is like 4 beats in, hold 4, 4 out, hold 4, that down regulates your nervous system into a parasympathetic state. And then you can move into your right brain, which is where joy, play, very much of the moment thinking lives. Then it's way more comfortable mentally and physically to just be present and watch your thoughts like a passing river and sit with yourself and be with yourself and experience your consciousness without feeling like a monkey that's being pulled out of recess and chained to the floor. So that's a couple of pieces of advice I would give on that. You want to make sure you're practicing the right practice for the experience you're trying to have from yoga or from meditation, because there's a lot of different applications of both. Like, for example, you can do a walking meditation, an eating meditation. There's all different kinds of meditations you can do, because really all meditative practice is focusing your attention on a single locus of focus, they call it. And so whatever that you choose that to be, that can become a contemplative or meditative practice. Just like watching a film can be meditative if you're fully directing your attention into that, right? So make sure you have the right practice for the desired outcome, and then make sure that you are taking steps to regulate your nervous system so that you're in the right state of mind and body to experience whatever practice you're engaging with.
Wow, that was so much knowledge. Thank you.
You're welcome. I've struggled with this a lot and I've learned a lot.
No. So, breath work. You said there's box breath, which is 4 breaths in.
Well, there's different kinds of box breathing, but you just, 4 beats in. So like you inhale for 4 beats, hold for 4 beats, exhale for 4. I don't know if this is going to be the most entertaining thing for the audience to watch, but
how many times do you do that normally?
Until you start to feel calm. You should feel your nervous system relax.
No, I'm kidding.
Well, I mean, maybe that doesn't work for you, right? You have to find. There's other things. There's physical points on your body that you can touch. So something I do a lot is I'll if I'm feeling anxious.
I have noticed you do the.
Yeah. Because this
is that?
It's a place where you can touch your body, where it just like kind of makes you feel safe and like it calms your nervous system.
Yeah, I guess actually I have my version of that. If I'm ever going through something I know is going to be painful physically, I grab my nails, pinch them super, super hard.
I don't know if that would fall into the same sort of somatic practice, but anxiety and self-harm are calming for some people, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, so what about happiness?
What about happiness, Claire?
My dad always says this quote to me, which I've talked about before, is success is getting what you want. Happiness is liking what you get. How do you know, as someone who is super ambitious, I share a lot of that ambition as well, when you're just chasing to chase, obsessed with the outcome versus detaching from the outcome and chasing from passion?
So again, this gets back to something we talked about at the beginning, which is being honest with yourself about whether or not you're engaging in an allopathic or infantile defense mechanism of avoidance of something else, because that is a strategy a lot of people do. They become workaholics to avoid dealing with something internally. It sounds like you may know someone who is familiar with this experience. Or if it's like, hey, this is really adding a lot of value to my life, to other people's lives. I have a community around this. It's like a very healthy sort of like connecting and holistic part of my life, and I enjoy giving energy and attention to it because of how many beautiful things are coming out of it. So you kind of have to be circumspect and honest with yourself about what the underlying motivation is. And then also, like I said, engage the advice and guidance of trusted third parties and get their perspective too, because a lot of times people will tell you like, hey, I'm worried about you, you're working too hard, I'm noticing you're not taking care of yourself as well, you're not sleeping as much, it seems like you're overdoing it or something. And, so somebody who you trust gives you that feedback, Claire, maybe listen to John about certain things if he's worried about you. So that's some things I would say about that. The other thing I would say too is like I'm very much I kind of don't like the word happiness. Happiness to me is a very ephemeral, fleeting, elated, like Christmas morning type of like euphoric rush. And I don't think it is healthy or mature to try to seek that kind of life. I think you want much more of like the Japanese have a word called ikigai, which is like a life's purpose. You want meaning. You want deep, rich contentment, fulfillment, purposeful living, where you are needed by other people. You have reciprocity with other people. You're part of a community. You're valued. You matter. You're giving, but you're also being given to. And there's like a kind of a flow state and like a holistic community experience that you're participating in and helping to cultivate at the same time. So you're benefiting from it, but you're also giving to it. That I think is the more mature, sustaining, and like healthy version of what people mean when they say the word happiness, because you shouldn't really be seeking a sugar rush hit from life. You should be looking for deep, meaningful, sustained, long-term purpose and place. And I think that reframing of that is helpful for some people, I think.
Yeah, because I feel like happiness in my mind is defined in a lot of ways and tied to professional success, monetary success, also your looks. It's a lot of the external, and I think you've told me about that before. A lot of it is external, and you said, Claire, you need to do a kindness loving meditation immediately, and Claire, you need to look more inward. I think what my metric is, which I'd be curious to hear about.
I didn't say it with such harshness. I told you I was concerned, and I thought it would be good for you to take some time to do a loving kindness, like self-directed loving kindness meditation. That's all. So I listen. You don't have to listen to me about everything, but if I'm concerned about my friend, I'm going to say something. I was kidding. But making sure.
First of all, the song that you sent me was very, very interesting because it made me feel very, I don't know, happy. Happy, not we're not using the word happy. It made me feel very joyous, and
you can be happy. Happy isn't a bad thing. It's just not like the be all end all, you know?
Yeah. So I think, where was I going with this?
I'm sorry. I feel like I've confused you.
No,
I'm
it's
a
okay.
terrible guest.
It's
My
okay.
bad.
No, you're the best. I just had a thought. I feel like I've gotten the feedback from you, which I agree that a lot of it, for me personally, has come from the external, whether it be friends or whether it be relationships or whether it be family. And I think at the end of the day, someone who I think is the most powerful is someone who's able to go to bed alone and wake up alone. The people who truly don't need anyone, I feel like, are very strong. Do you agree or disagree?
No, I think that's a hyper independence. It's a description of hyper independence, which I think is a trauma response. And I think that human beings are wired for connection. We need intimacy. We need each other. And a lot of people who have unhealthy or, let's say, unhealthy relationships or unmet needs or wounds from relationships, there's a great song by Paul Simon, I am a rock, I am an island, and a rock feels no pain and an island never cries. And people convince themselves that they're happy alone. And it's not to say that a person can't live a fulfilling life or be happy alone. Like monks create intimacy with their other brothers, but it's a different kind of intimacy. I'm not trying to say that anybody who is alone or living alone is inherently dysfunctional or wrong or bad. I'm just saying that like I don't like the idea that it's a strength to be alone. I think it's a strength to be able to build healthy relationships with other people and be willing to give yourself to the intimacy and vulnerability that requires. And I think that a lot of times people look at people who are alone and by themselves as these pillars of strength, when in reality, not that they're cowards, but they're afraid of facing something within themselves. And so in order to avoid facing that, they sever connections with other people because other people are mirrors.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I think I feel like throughout our lives, we are taught the things that are going to make us happy, you know, and it's kind of pushed on you throughout when you're being educated in middle school, elementary school, and high school, it's like you're supposed to work, you're supposed to get a job, you're supposed to, get married. And I feel like there's the traditional way of happiness. And so when people don't feel like that's necessarily aligned with them, that can sometimes be very challenging, But I think my parents, it's ironic because they say, okay, Claire, it doesn't really, there's so much more to life than money. There's so much more to life than being happy with the success that you have professionally, which I put a lot of weight on. Mm-hmm. But my dad especially has had an amazing career, and I'm sure he strived for that very hard, So it's ironic how we're raised and how that makes a difference.
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything wrong with working hard or wanting to build a successful career, or with deriving value from creating businesses or economic value. It's just, I think all of this goes back to this Aristotelian idea of the middle way, of arete, of balance, of ataraxia. This like you want to have balance in these things, and it's different for every person, but anything that overwhelms or overpowers your life to a point where you're sacrificing your health and well-being or not able to function well, that is where things become damaging. That's where you start to have issues. So it's not to say that you can't work hard or take your career very seriously or be successful. It's just that if you source all of your validation, meaning, and self-worth from that one thing, that's probably not a healthy relationship with it that needs to be re-examined.
Sourcing all your validation from one thing. This reminds me of the podcast episode I was listening to this morning, and I really liked it. It said, okay, well, first of all, this really good quote: "A bad day for the ego is a great day for the soul." I love that. And then, sorry, I'm going a little haywire. It was... If you depend on anything, you have to lose it. If something controls you, you're going to lose it. You must learn how to become your own creator. What you were saying reminded me a little bit of that, because if you are maybe it was you that I was talking to about this, but if you are so obsessive about getting something, we can apply this to dating and professionally. If you are so obsessed with finding the perfect person, if you're so obsessed with getting the perfect job or the highest salary, you sometimes can detract yourself from your purpose and your mission. And so you are bound to lose that thing like that you want, or so you're bound to never get that thing that you want so bad.
Yeah. Was there a question in all of that?
No,
what came to mind for me was a Bob Dylan quote, which he said that life is not about finding yourself, life is about creating yourself. And I think that all of us depend on other people and other things. So I don't totally agree with the quote, but I do agree with the idea that we are not defined by like what clothes we wear or what job we have. We are defined by our values, our identity, and that isn't tied to, what somebody thinks of us, or if we're married or not, or if we are a CEO or not, or a founder or not. So yeah, I think that there's some wisdom in all of those things.
I think the part that I grapple with, which I've shared with you, and you know this, is that which my friend Max has also tried to tell me, is that you need to be comfortable with just being. Like, just being you. You as you are is enough. And that's what Alan Watts says. That's what a bunch of these brilliant people say. But I think for me, what I've tried to figure out is, am I doing this because of how I will be perceived by other people? Or am I doing this because I actually like it? And I think when I was, for example, an educational influencer, at first it was authentic to me. It was, I actually want to do this and I actually want to teach people this. But when I started spewing things that I didn't even believe in, that's when it started being like, I was depressed. I wasn't eating well because it felt like I wasn't being true to myself. I wasn't being authentic to myself.
Alan Watts has this idea of, I think it's pronounced Wu Wei, which is like let go. And this kind of gets to this Buddhist idea of not desiring things, non-attachment. There's some wisdom in that. I also think that I see a balance between that and other things, because if you're not trying to strive towards something, if there's not something that you are wanting, if there isn't a gulf between where you are and where you would like to be, it gives you the permission to just sit down in a toga and be happy with a bowl of rice. That, to me, is a kind of rejection of existence in a different way, right? It's maybe more peaceful, but it is still a rejection of the opportunities of life in many ways, and just saying, like, I'm going to sit here and just contemplate and just exist and be. So I'm not saying that there's not a place for that, but I think that that's like one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is, so that's like the Eastern traditions of like, clean the mirror of consciousness, remember that you are not separate from all things, and just, become aware of oneness, and that completes you. And so that's sort of like, so the Eastern traditions. The Western traditions, we have a totally different perspective. We amuse ourselves to death. We create medication to like, calm ourselves and to like anesthetize ourselves, and we deal with suffering in a different way. So that's like the East, they try to like reject life and reject suffering by just contemplation and consciousness. In the West, we amuse ourselves with all these endless sorts of entertainments and carnal obsessions and abuses, and then like medicate ourselves out of any sort of pain. And so both of those, in my view, are kind of different forms of rejection of life. I think the example that I have tried to follow is sort of this middle ground. I've been thinking about this a lot, which is Christ's example of not staying in heaven, but not staying in hell, and not coming to earth and living a life, but not indulging in all of these like base vices, but suffering for a purpose. And so I think that there's, in any sort of system of philosophy you want to create around the nature of existence, there is, I think you have to deal with the problem of evil and the problem of suffering. And I think that the suffering is, I don't know if I believe this fully or not, because I'm still trying to work this out of my own mind, but I think that the suffering is the point. And it's not about meaningless suffering, it's about suffering for a meaning. Viktor Frankl wrote about this, about anybody is capable of enduring an enormous amount of pain and suffering if there is a meaning, if there is a purpose. And that's one of the things that got me through my heartbreak and all of that suffering, was I believed that my life was worth living. I believed that it was worth surviving this. And just to be clear, that's not something that's taken for granted. 2 days ago, a guy I went to elementary school with, who was 33 years old, 1 year younger than me, unalived himself, because he went through a divorce, and about the same amount of time ago as my breakup, and he was not able to negotiate that in a way where he was able to find meaning and purpose and to get through that. And so not everybody survives these things. Another guy I knew used to lead, he was a balloon captain in the Macy's parade. He was single his whole life, but he loved leading the parade. His cat died, and it was like the only thing he had in his life that gave him love and purpose. He was drinking heavily, grieving a lot, fell down, hurt himself, and they told him that he couldn't lead the parade anymore. And so the day before Thanksgiving, rather than watch the parade go on without him, he unalived himself too. So I think that the Christian example is not to just have total non-attachment and reject the suffering and problems and challenges of life. And it is not the Western overindulgence, turning to pornography and drugs to just like amuse ourselves through the suffering, but it is to choose to experience the suffering, not turn away from it, not get drunk through it, but to experience it and to have a meaning and a purpose for it, and find meaning and purpose in it. And like Camus says, one must imagine Sisyphus glad. We don't know what the ultimate purpose of all of this existence is, but we must imbue it with meaning and purpose, otherwise it is not survivable. And it is a life or death thing that every person has to, in their own mind and heart, face, wrestle with, and come up with that meaning and purpose. So I think this is another reason why I think literature is so important to me. It's why I want to create art, because the art that I have consumed has edified my life. Leonard Cohen said, I wanted to write words that might be read on nights like this by one like me. And I think that is meaningful, right? If my suffering can lead me to find meaning, that I can create a piece of art to give to someone else who in 100 years from now might sift through the galaxy of AI slop to find something I have made, and from that draw meaning and purpose to deal with life suffering, to say that I will love again, I will live again, my life has value, my love has value, I am worth fighting for and carrying myself through this. That to me is the meaning and the purpose. So I think that there's a value to all of these different systems, and there's value to all of the things in medicine and in entertainment and in consciousness and Buddhism and all these different things. But the Christian example of suffering with purpose and then surviving that and finding meaning for it, from it, through it, and on the other side of it, mostly on the other side of it, because the suffering is not eternal. but your soul is, and that's what's important.
But how do you, first of all, that was such a sad story. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. You have nothing to apologize for. But second of all, I think I agree that suffering is such a big and fundamental part of life. And I do think people who have suffered a lot do have, in my opinion, the most power to experience the most joy, because if you understand one side of the spectrum, you can really understand the other side. If we were, quote unquote, happy all the time, happiness wouldn't be anything, right? It wouldn't be special because it's consistent. So I think people who have, I've talked about this with other people before, people who have suffered a lot, in my experience, have also experienced a great deal of joy once they make it out the other side of that suffering. But how do you know when it is time to kind of like turn the switch on in terms of, okay, let's stop the pity party, let's stop being sad about this? Because I think sometimes I've seen this in myself, I've done this myself, and I know other people who have done this as well. It's good to feel your way through it, sit with your own shit, really. That's what you're supposed to do. But there comes a point where it's like, okay, I think it's time we try to switch things on a little bit, turn the lights on. It's time to get up. It's time to get ready for the other side of the world, for the other side of whatever this wall of sadness has to offer. And on the other side is sunshine and green grass and rainbows and unicorns and horses. Okay. How do you know, and what do you do when it's that time?
So first of all, I don't think that there is an other side where there's green grass and rainbows and horses. There's not. Nobody ever gets to utopia. And I think it's a good idea to divorce yourself of the idea that grief is something that you just like leave behind and never think about again.
That is true. Sorry, really fast to interrupt, because I think the biggest thing that I learned in my breakup was that I thought, I'm going to get through this, and once it's done, we never have to deal with it again. We never have to think about it again. I will be happy. There's going to be one last day where it's done. And that's never actually the case. And I think the part that made it so hard to get over was not the fact that I was feeling these emotions, is that I would shame myself so much for feeling sad about it. I remember after 8 months, I was like, damn, I'm still sad. There was one day in particular where I was sad. Valentine's Day, I was sad. And I was like, well, what do you mean? It's been 8 months. Why are we still sad about this? Claire, you're lame. And then my therapist was over there. Claire, feel your feelings. This is all part of it. Grief is not something that you can just turn on and off that goes away as soon as you wave your magic wand. That's just not how it works. It's part of the getting over grief is learning how to live with it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it is just what you said. It is learning how to walk with a limp. It is learning how to live with it. It is learning how to exist in a state of loss. My first best friend was someone I met before I had memory. We were playing with each other in the crib as babies. We lived on the same block. Our mothers were friends. We became friends. He was my best friend. I saw him as often as I could up until kindergarten. And then, several things happened. Like we stayed friends all our lives, but he died in a car accident. He was driving a car and trying to show off for a girl and went off the road, ran into a tree. Everyone else was okay. The steering column went right through his chest and he was just gone in a second. And I haven't seen him or spoken to him in over 15 years, but I will never forget my friend Ben. And I will always consider him one of my best friends. And I love Ben. I'm not going to stop loving Ben. And, just because and it's, a weird thing about relationships too, like, even though I'm aware that I was abused and manipulated and like very badly harmed by the relationship that I had, that betrayal, and this is part of why betrayal trauma is so hard, the betrayal means that I can't trust this person anymore. It means that they aren't who I thought they were, but it doesn't sever the attachment, and that attachment and love is really within me, and it's a beautiful part of myself. So you have to get kind of comfortable with the idea that, okay, I'm still going to feel some measure of affection for this person, maybe forever, but that doesn't mean that it's love, right? It's like an addiction that was abused into me. But it also doesn't mean that they're a monster. I don't believe in this idea of splitting, which is something with like people with borderline personality disorder do. Like somebody's either all bad or all good. that's not true of my ex. It's not true of anybody. And so I think that you kind of have to just learn to live with these things, but you have to resolve some of the cognitive dissonance about it, right? Like one of the things that helped me, a therapist said this idea of layers of truth, like multiple things can be true because you experienced it one way at the time. Now things are different. So you remember it a different way. You have a different view on it. Instead of trying to reconcile that and put everybody into good, bad, or this, that, or the other, recognize that there's layers of truth on things. And, in your example, yeah, Valentine's Day is going to make you sad. There's movies I will never watch again. There's music by artists. Like I had to write some of my own Leonard Cohen songs because I can't listen to the old Leonard Cohen songs now. So there's a lot of things like that, but you have to have your own process with grief. And, to get to your other question about how do you know when it's time to turn on the lights and get going and stop the pity party? If it ever feels like a pity party, don't do that. That's not good, right? But I think you'll kind of know when you're done grieving, and the grief will come and go in waves. It'll always be there in certain ways. Yeah. But you do learn to live with it if you can get through it enough to get to that place. But I don't think it ever goes away, and I think you have to just be comfortable with that. It's non-linear. It comes in waves. You may never think about it again in 30 years. You could hear a song or see a movie and you just start crying again. Yeah, exactly. So that's being human.
I think part of the grief, I'm pretty sure this is a step in the grief process, is acceptance. Mm-hmm. And accepting that you will feel this way, and accepting that this is just part of the process of healing, whether it be romantic, whether it be a death. I am coming to terms with the fact that my grandpa, who I absolutely love to pieces, is in the process of passing away. And it is so devastating. It's so weird because when I found out, he's in the retirement home now. He's doing better, thank God. But he doesn't want to, if he gets sick again, he doesn't want to, try to keep him alive. But grief and just any sort of really hard emotion is such an interesting thing because sometimes your body doesn't know what to do with it. And this, in reflecting on the way I felt during a breakup versus when I'm hearing that my grandpa no longer wants to fight for his own life anymore, it's a very different feeling. There's one is like visceral heartbreak. I feel like I'm dying. The other one, this feeling is more so just very hollowing. It's I really can't put into words. It's like there's something that I will be missing forever. It's mourning the future that I'm going to have with him. I remember I was on the phone with him and I was like, oh, I feel fine. I was a little bit sad about this. My dad had told me the news. But then as soon as I get on the phone with him, I see his face and I bawl my eyes out. And I'm just like, I just love you so much. I was like, you just mean the world to me. I want you at my wedding. Like, I want you at my wedding. And he's like, Claire, I will be. And then I just broke down completely because I was like, no, I know you're fucking lying. What the fuck? So my long-winded way of saying, I don't know why I went on that tangent there, but I think it's the way I reposition grief, and this is not having to do with abuse or anything, but I think grief in the beautiful way is proof that you really loved something. It's proof that I really loved the person I was in a relationship with. It's proof that I love my grandpa more than anything,
That was very beautiful, and I'm sorry to hear that your grandfather's passing.
Can't believe I'm crashing out on camera.
Yeah. This took a very different turn.
I know.
But I think it's very human. And I think a lot of people feel this way and don't have anywhere to talk about it or don't feel safe to talk about it. So I really appreciate your bravery for talking about it with me and for sharing that with me. I think one of the things that came up for me is this notion of ambiguous loss, which is part of grief where you have a big, profound sense of loss, but it's not localized, it's not specific, and it's just sort of like this ambiguous feeling of something being lost, and there's something to grieve there. There are a lot of other grief counselors and therapists who are better with these things than me, but you're not the only person who feels that way, and it's a hard thing to navigate. But yeah, I like there's a lot of people who love you, there's a lot of people who are here for you, and yeah, just I'm sorry you're going through that.
Oh no, it's all good. I know it's part. It's just, I know I seem emotional now, and I am, but I think it's all part of life. I genuinely, I came to accept it very fast with my grandpa, for example. It is, death is a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, in my opinion, being heartbroken is a part of life. And I truly mean that, what I was saying earlier, which is to grieve something or someone in a healthy way is to know that you loved them, to know that you loved something, to know that you were capable of opening your heart like that to someone, to let them in. And I mean this in a platonic, romantic, familial sense, all of the above, professional, whatever way. It's like the fact that you were open enough to know that you're capable of loving something is very special.
There is a film director whose work I very much enjoy, named Kelly Reichardt. And me and my ex watched a lot of her films together. And so I can't watch, I still watch her new films, but I can't really watch some of her old films anymore because it's one of those things. It's just like Leonard Cohen said, I ache in the places where I used to play. And sometimes when you have grief, when you have loss, places where you used to find a lot of joy, now you find a lot of pain. But what this brings up for me is a line from one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen called Old Joy. And the line in the movie is, sorrow is just old joy. And that, I think, is a beautiful way of expressing kind of what you're saying, is that grief is what is left when we have loved well and truly and deeply. And it's a beautiful thing. And there's a line, and I think it's in Louis C.K.'s TV show, where he says that the grieving process is still, it's love persevering, it's love persisting, and it's love living on after love. But eventually there will come a time, maybe 10, 15, 30 years, however long, when you think about that person and, it's like you maybe don't feel it anymore. And that's when it's kind of like out of your system, and that love that lived so loudly and strongly and well in you is gone. Hopefully by then you have other loves and things like that. But there is a celebration in knowing that feeling of grief means that you authentically and powerfully did love someone or something, and that's a beautiful thing in and of itself to celebrate and recognize. So I'm glad that you have that perspective. I think that's healthy.
And I'm glad you do as well. And we're going to end it here before there's more tears. Thank you for coming.
You're very welcome.
Always such a good conversation.
Yeah. By the way, just for the record, we had talked about discussing the Netflix, Paramount, Warner Brothers situation, and that's what I prepared for. And so it's good to see you again, Claire.